Greetings, this is Robert Carillio.
And Jeremy Hempy.
This is Green Arenas.
Going to broach the subject of littering, illegal dumping, recycling in the city, statewide, doesn't really have to be limited to the city or the metro area. And some of the things we should probably be doing about it, or upping the game about these things. I happen to feel that, first of all, littering just is one of the most sources of pollution. And to prevent that, we just simply don't throw it onto the ground.
That's a really, really optimistic take there, Robert. I mean, for our inaugural episode of Green Arenas here, I mean, we have to look at why the sources keep accumulating and what's being done and productively in other areas.
Correct. I just was thinking about the origin of this, and for what, compared to the history of the world, maybe the last 200 years, most, if not all, of this pollution was occurring in that time. And let's just narrow the topics to the waste and the litter. And I always thought, well, wouldn't it be helpful? Here's some solutions. It can start by, Kim was chiming in on this, about making better choices when we shop. Try to simply buy products with the least amount of packaging, whether it be a dry good product, whatever the product is, or food, especially food, because we want to keep plastics, for example, if they're going to be here, on something that we're going to use for a long, long time, and it's going to stay around a long time in use in some form, not single use and food and throw it away. So we have a prevention in choosing to not buy products with so much packaging. For example, you go to the store. Why do you have to put 2 sweet potatoes or 2 yams in a plastic bag? I never do. Why do you have to have a separate plastic bag to wrap one little thing inside of another bag, or double bags? So all of this is going to be something that can eventually be used to carry outside and to litter, and some form litter. So it starts with the decisions that we make when we buy in a consumer society. Do you agree with that, Jeremy?
I mean, in so many ways, we know that there's been just more difficulty. The clamshell containers and the disposable yogurt containers, these are difficult to recycle. They're more likely to end up, dumped somewhere that can't use them. And if you're not careful, you end up scraping these containers and you get little microplastics as you're eating and stuff like that. So it is worth it trying to, look out for what brands are using glass jars for, like, peanut butter, for instance.
Definitely
And
the type of, yeah, the type of packaging. If you can stick to, just like the least processed food would be the most nutritious, I think the least processed of packagings, or the least packaging that is something that nature really would have never made on its own, should be avoided. Okay, so we can go back to trying to select glass, or trying to select a paper bag if we're going to use it at all. Something, at least, if it winds up outside, somehow it can break down easily, and nature recognizes this, what to do with it. And in some ways, when we get to the trash fish argument, that's not argument, but if we get to the trash fish interview, it's going to be interesting, because he has some pretty lofty ideas on, sobering ideas on how to deal with this problem. And
yeah, one of his pet peeves has been the lack of it's being exposed that it was a cover up, that we were duped into believing that plastics were more recyclable than they really are. And you're seeing that take place with the difficulty of some of these local polluters in Akron. They have this plastics burning type facility, and it has a lot of different pollutants that it's putting out. And so there has to be, more of a transparent process, where it's nice to see for instance, these perhaps building materials or something that we use this plastic be recycled. But in the meantime, I've gotten rid of all my polyester blankets. I'm really careful about, what's plastic in the dust that's being made. And we can do a lot through if we have more just regular water filtration and increased trust in the municipal tap waters and cleaner tap water. You'll see demand for plastic bottled water go down.
I always thought there should be a bottle bill in this state reintroduced somehow. Now, of course, the bottling industry is plastic. They don't want that. At least if there was, it's a shame. First of all, it's a shame that it should take some sort of monetary incentive to get people to not do something. But unfortunately, when everything revolves around that, if there's anything we can do that can give an incentive or inspiration at all, I'm willing to look at that. And this would be somehow, if it's feasible, and maybe a trash fish knows more about this, if it's feasible to revisit the idea of bottle bills in this state, for one thing. I thought it was just really just shocking that when he talks about all the microplastics and those nurdles or whatever they're called, it gets into the food. All of this gets eventually into food. Now, I'll tell you how this isn't just some new idea. For years, I've dealt with a product for a long, long, long time that knew it filters indoor air, it purifies indoor air through a process that's totally different. But anyway, this company has known for years that part of the dust makeup in house dust are plastics, nylon, rubber, paint, plastic, things like that. They've known this for years. And these days, it's now just kind of making its headway with the rest of the public in the environmental news out here, any environmental information about this. And yet I've known about this for years, that this is a component of dust. And so making better choices when we try to buy product with least packaging, try to buy products with packaging that is more simpler to recycle, the aluminum, the glass, get back to basics, not all this fancy packaging where you got three different, and this is a corporate decision that does this though, but I don't know if anybody ever demanded this kind of thing, but three different types of plastic or packaging on one product. For example, a pill bottle wrapped in plastic, inside on top of the cap, you've got another aluminum plus paper, like a metal paper peel back, plus the plastic ring around that. I think what companies should do is explore more ideas of keeping continuity, one package, one product, one throughout the product or the package, through and through, not three different types of recyclable materials on one product. Because if people throw that, they're not going to separate all that. If they throw that in the public bins, what's going to happen? It's just going to not even go into the recycle stream. And that's where I want you to comment right now. How does that look? How does the recycle stream get contaminated? What should they not do, Jeremy? If they're recycling from home, what should you not do in your recyclables that will ultimately go to transfer stations and so forth? What would not?
Well, it is improved in some areas. I read the city of Akron saw 20 some percent reduction in the contamination rates. But by and large, each waste company should have a list of what they accept and don't accept into a single stream recycling bin. Usually, pitfalls being, bubble wrap and styrofoam inserts that get into the cardboard boxes, and the cardboard and paper, the processors expect some level of plastic debris to end up in there. So it's almost like they can't completely get rid of it. And so it's built around kind of anticipating some. But basically, the front line of the solid waste sorters, we don't want to deal with different airborne building materials, if you put stuff in the recycling that can just start to blow up and create like a cloud of powder or something, then you're really could be getting in the eyes and nose of workers and stuff like that. I mean, there's just instances where the ventilation and fans and these kinds of, the factory I worked at in Twinsburg for Kimball companies, it needed better ventilation at a lot of the workstations. So, just the plastic films and things like that. They don't want a garbage bag. You see this stores. That's why the recycle bins should be farther away from the garbage bins, so people get to kind of reinforce that divide. Because if it's too close, people will not be paying attention to what they're doing and throw their garbage up in the recycle bin.
I agree. Do you think that this is a silly question, maybe, because I think you know the answer, but do you think we're over packaging things? For example, I ordered something from Young Living Oils, okay, an essential oil company. I probably shouldn't be mentioning it, but one little tiny bottle to ship from Utah. One little tiny bottle, no bigger than probably half the size of the average thumb, was put in a box that was probably triple or at least double the size of an ordinary shoebox. Plus there was bubble wrap. Plus there was paper wrap in there. Plus there was another type of in a plastic bag. I think that we are over packaging throughout the industry, throughout the consumer industry. Over packaging is a problem, and having to use packaging that is customized packaging for that particular company that's shipping something. For example, if you ordered something through shipping in the past, you might find it stuffed with old newspapers. You might find it stuffed with shredded old pieces of a thicker paper or something like that. Now you're seeing a lot of packaging that has a bubble wrap, for example, which most of that gets wasted. You see their name on the product. So do you think we are over packaging, and is it necessary? Is it overkill? Is it just creating an economy we don't really need? And do you think that a lot of the companies are actually creating customized packaging for themselves that is unnecessary? What would you say about that?
You're right that there's a gimmicky aspect that may be overproducing a branded packaging. We see a lot of it with the Shein shipment products, that they all have a plastic bag that says Shein from China, and we've seen a lot of that coming through the recycle conveyor belts. Sure, I mean, but if a big company makes a big decision, like we heard that Amazon wasn't going to ship in just plastic anymore, but we also got to defend our old growth trees and make sure there's sustainable pulp and papers. No, it is still what is it, prevalence. There's a prevalence of definitely some distinct over packaging.
Again, I always say that if collectively we are all part of the problem, why can't collectively we be all part of the solution? And all of everything we talked about right now, it all go back to, instead of waiting, which they should have involvement or to a degree have responsibility to help create a better situation here, but we don't have to wait for governments, local, city, state, whatever, national, to come in and save the day like the Lone Ranger. We have the heart, the courage, and the brains right now, and all along we've had it. We're just not using it. If we make better decisions when we shop, whether this package is necessary or not, or whether this is necessary or not using bags, and we don't have to, trying to reduce that packaging, that makes the impact that could force the change from the industrial level. But at the same time, I've always said, well, we also create economies we don't need. Like, we have a packaging industry that is burgeoning, and it's really not necessary. But why is it here? Just because we can, just because we can frack enough oil and gas to end up making plastic with it. Okay, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. And I think that's where we are with a lot of the packaging industry these days. We don't
Right.
need it.
I just want
Right.
to interrupt because it occurred to me there was a big expose on Kalamazoo, Michigan, and they have some of the worst air quality because of some kind of packaging manufacturer that's there. So we're seeing this like better coverage by like outlets like ProPublica is tracking our air quality very well, and all the cancer threats and cancer cluster threats. You're right. And now that it's they've been able to track what nurdle factories in the Texas Gulf Coast, for instance, is a major source of plastic pollution there.
I'm finding it. I hike a lot, and my area of interest is just getting excited about the aquatic life in our streams, the diversity of aquatic life. And I think it's inspiring to get people to want to protect these resources that not only keep these fish alive, but ultimately keep us alive. And I always had a philosophy, if you can get somebody excited about something and wanting to protect it and enthused, that helps a lot, because enthusiasm is hard to generate. So my approach was always to get them excited about doing it. But even in areas I used to go into the streams, where I never thought I would find a lot of these components of litter or trash or waste, dumping and whatever, I'm finding it in areas I never thought I'd find it before. And this is just why it must go back to, at some point, consumers making a better choice, industry making better choices on how they choose to make packaging or what they choose to use. So in a way, this is the best we can get, is create a message in a bottle, if you will, of information for people in the now and in the future of what they can do to be a collective part of making the problem better. I also want to just kind of switch the page here and go up to the level of a statewide issue, and I'm going to use ODOT for an example on highways, litter on highways. Can I go there on that topic?
Okay, yeah, a state potential
Yeah.
change.
Okay, so for years, I've done these video awarenesses on one of the local news stations to raise awareness. And one of the problems we have around here, and this is probably just human nature anywhere, so I'm not picking on any one place, but they often, have you ever heard of the old message or the old adage that they always kill the messenger? Well, yeah, I'm not saying I'm some great messenger here, okay? But what I'm saying is, I've noticed that when you bring up a topic around here and you call attention to the problem, like littering, for example, people are quick to say, well, why don't you do something instead of complain? Why don't you do something about it? Well, they don't even know who you are. They don't even know what your history has been in doing something about it. They automatically assume that just because you bring this topic up, you must be part of the problem. Now, my answer to that has always been, well, first of all, you don't know who I am, so you have no right to make that comment on something you know nothing about. Number two, if you do not litter, if you choose to not litter, you are being a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Those who call out the problem to keep it in the focus of the public eye are not the problem. Okay, so I
So
really want that.
did this happen to you with ODOT's bouncing
Well,
back and saying that
it,
you should do something about it, not them?
yeah, it has. Okay, it has, and I brought it up on message board, and it has. And this is funny because look, they have spent in a 3-year period, and this is ongoing, but I'm just in the past 10, 12 years, I'm going to slice out 3 years. And I think this was between 20, maybe 17, 18, 19, 20, somewhere around there in those years. Okay, but the important thing is, out of the last 15 years or so, we're going to slice out a 3-year period of what ODOT has spent alone on trying to abate litter along state highways, state roads, interstates, and so forth, and hardly make a dent, okay? Because it seems to rain garbage and litter. So what I've noticed is this trend that they have spent in that time, and it's their numbers, okay? You can look them up, they're available with ODOT. I think it was in excess of $40 million. So for every Ohioan in this state, over 11 million Ohioans, that was like 3.3 million per Ohioan if you broke it up there. So I have a somewhat radical, and I know it'll be unpopular.
$3 per Ohioan.
Right. No,
at least.
right. Okay. So if you look at this, it was 3 million for Ohioan. Okay. Not that everybody's pulled out of their pocket to spend it, but if you've taken what ODOT's budget is and spread it around the whole state out of pocket, that's what it would have been. So I'm looking at this, and so since this, even on highways, and a lot of people say, well, just have the community service go out there and do it. Why don't their prisoners are doing it? Yeah, that's all well and good, but those programs cost money too. So either way, it costs. And so in that, it's costing so much, and you can put it down to dividing it amongst all the citizens of the state. I think the litter penalty should be stiff, because if it's costing the state that much on what is such a preventable form of pollution, should the penalties be high? Hell yeah, they should be high. They should be enforcing these laws if people are caught throwing stuff out of the window.
Well,
Not only is that safe,
hasn't it gone up? Have you seen the sign saying what 500? It went from 100 to 500, or in several along several highways. I know Route 8, for instance. I saw it was pretty stiff. It says, and they're trying to whatever for people to secure their trunks or their cabs, and then there's some education around that.
yeah,
But
we don't have. That's another thing. You raise a good point. The tie down laws are non-existent. The tie down, the safety. For example, trucks used to have to pull into weigh stations regularly. We don't. We maybe have 2 or 3 of those left in Ohio. I don't even know how many are left. They used to have to make sure things were tied down. They'd weigh the truck. They got inspected. So the Department of Transportation, I don't think they're doing enough to enforce or be a part of promoting the enforcement of better tie down laws or securing your load. So that's a good point that you brought up. I think they should do more if they're going to spend that much on promoting the cleanups and such that they do along the highways. Very little, if any. I've only seen one attempt in 15 years, and I'm not saying there haven't been any other out there. I'm just saying I personally have not, and this is something I pay attention to. In 15 years, I have seen just last year, within a year and a half, ODOT finally come up with an online campaign against promoting and fostering an anti-littering environment, a culture in this state. Okay. And one time. And so do I think
for an anti-littering culture?
Correct. To promote an anti-littering culture. Correct. Okay. So I've noticed also an increase. A lot of people have asked me, when have you noticed an increase in litter? Of course, it hit a hiatus in the late 60s, early 70s, and we had the crying Indian commercial with Keep America Beautiful. Then it cleaned up for years and years and years and years and years. Okay. Got a lot better. Then in the mid 90s came the invasion, pretty much the early to mid 90s, came the invasion of the ultra big, mega big box store invasion in Ohio. And I think obviously the more consumer goods with packaging you have trucked into the state, obviously at some point it's going to result in a lot more solid waste and litter. And just when I say litter, I don't mean just somebody throwing a little piece of something down. I mean dumping, I mean just garbage or packaging or plastic or dump that
when it's
winds up in the environment.
When it's all the takeout containers and little sauce trays and just the amount of single-use items that gets accumulated. And it's one thing to look ahead of time, and people should start mentioning this in their reviews. If you should bring your own clasping container, for instance, this place down the street is this Indian vegetarian place, but everything is served in a plastic tub. So even like a hot sit down meal, and that's such a pet peeve for me. I swear that I ate too much microwave plastic growing up, and when I looked into it, it could have contributed to my acne. So I'm a total lifelong kind of more plastics aware type because of that. And even I'm far from perfect because it's so hard, but
Well, that's another area too where restaurants can do better by reducing what, and Kim wanted to talk about that too. At some point, we'll get her in here, but about reducing. Why do you need a plastic cup if you're going to have coffee in the establishment? I thought that was to go. If you were going to get something to go, you had that to go. Now they're serving it in there, right there. and it gets thrown away just after that amount of time. Joel Salatin, who wrote the book, several books, but he's an organic farmer in Virginia. He wrote the book Folks This Ain't Normal. He really made a good point that when he does talks around the world about organic farming, the right way to do it, he debunks the whole industrial farm model. He said, here's something he said. He said, it's just shocking. When you go on a plane, or when you eat a meal, it should be that what's in front of you disappears and you have less when you're all left over. Except when you're on a plane, you eat these meals and there's so much packaging associated and wrapped everything, including toothpicks. There's more waste when you're finished than there was when you started. And that's a sobering revelation there. When you're done eating on a plane, you actually have more waste than when you had when you started, except the food. The food is nothing. The waste is like the majority of everything, and it should be the food that's the majority of everything on that plate, and the waste is very minor or minuscule. But no, it's the other way around. And so here's what I want to ask you. What do you think it's a shame that here's something the mayors of any city could do. You think they would get on and at least make public service announcements to promote an anti-littering culture, for one thing, to promote a different culture, a culture change, because we're from the days of the crying Indian and the days of cleaning it up. Now we're back. We've backpedaled and we've fallen back, and now it's getting messy again. And
look at the sweeping impact that the turtle with the straw in its nose. I mean, there's these flashpoints. These flashpoints where people do come to revisit the issue, but with there being, such, I guess, lax standards, and there's a little bit more that every level can do, the corporations, the policies, and us as consumers.
As consumers, exactly. And I thought, well, simple things we can do without having to have 20 meetings and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay. These are kind of the solutions I'm looking at. We're empowered to do these things on our own, that we can make an impact. We don't have to wait for the Lone Ranger to save the day, but we can look at something like, I was going to say, mayors making frequent public service announcements about litter. You have not seen that one time here in Cleveland. You have not seen it in Northeast Ohio. You've not seen it except for that ad that ODOT had maybe a year and a half ago. That is one thing.
I do believe that, there was a sheriff's PSA about fireworks leading up to the 4th that I think was along the lines of a good litter PSA. It was saying that you're not able to operate these bullshit fireworks, so please leave it up to the professionals. I don't think it's, and to then say, well, even the professionals at Progressive Field should do way less fireworks and aim for no fireworks just for air quality alone.
That I hope to get to that topic. That'll be a whole other show about the noise. I want to tie that in with noise. That does so many different forms of pollution all at once. Yeah. So that one, that's kind of its own beast in and of itself. It has so many polluting elements and with just one item. Okay.
But along this line, the county does have a bring your own bag campaign. They need to do more, and it needs to be more thorough.
Fireworks has components of air pollution, components of litter, solid waste pollution, and components of noise pollution, all three in the same product. Okay. That's something that deserves its own show, its own topic, and we'll get to that. But like the mayor, mayors, state departments need to do better. They've got litter prevention programs collecting on shelves that are collecting dust. They're not doing enough to put these in schools. The mayors are not doing enough to make these PSAs, or state departments. And you said you saw one from the sheriff department. Well, that's good, but we need to do way better. I know states like South Carolina, Georgia, and down to the Carolinas, they were having the same problem on highways. They started to put the billboard campaigns out there, and they upped the ante on the campaigns to promote an anti-littering culture and environment. And it worked. It helped. It's actually reduced the problems there. And we're not seeing enough here. So I think that is one way. Now, here's a solution. If people only understand the money, I was going to get back and I skipped over myself. But okay, look, this is not going to be popular. And this is just food for thought. So if you're a betting person, think of it as a bet, just to see. If you're an experimental person, just think of this idea as something to try to see if it actually works. That is, any county, any neighborhood, anywhere that has the most amount of litter found, well, there needs to be a cut in public subsidy for those areas or counties because we're paying for it in the public pot with ODOT alone. So somehow, I think if you've seen a cut in some funding for things, you would probably see a turnaround pretty quickly if you saw the corporate welfare slash somehow subsidies in areas, and you saw uh, welfares on the lower end of the totem pole cut in subsidies, lifetime, making lifestyles out of this stuff, whether it be at a corporate level or a social level. I think and I don't want to punish people, but look, if this is what it takes to reduce this problem, just to see if it makes a dent, then there needs to be some sort of a penalty for this, because we can't go on. We can't go on like this. Our streams, our water is literally choking in garbage. What do you think?
What are the chances? What are the chances that the litterer perpetrators are even going to catch wind that this consequence is taking a toll out there? And that, I know, we try to do that. They're supposed to do that with transportation money and saying, if your area is a non-air quality compliant area, you may lose your transportation funding job, some of them, because of that, or there's supposed to be some kind of mechanisms there. And it's certainly one that could have some potential reach with the right people, at least to get the a small dent, to encourage, because it's just occurred to me that it's just going to happen to the towns that don't have climate action plans, can't apply for the federal EPA money that is going to be helping whatever towns have already gotten their plans together. So it's one of the qualifications.
So you're saying it kind of, my idea, this idea kind of aligns with that concept, what you just said. Okay. And it should, because it should be tried, because look, we've done cleanups. I've done these for years, and I'm not saying that cleanups aren't important. I'm not trying to poo-poo or rain on people's parade that organize these. I've done it too. I've literally carried bags of garbage in my trunk that I've cleaned up off the street every single day. But you know what?
Anytime it strikes me, if I have some minutes and I know that the area needs it,
Well, it needs it, okay? But here's the problem with this. We're doing everything, we're doing so much on the back end of things, nothing in the front end. And I think that a lot of times, especially around here, these cleanups become, are we still here?
Yes.
Okay. So I think these cleanups can become an enabler for those who litter and trash. When they see other people constantly cleaning it up, they think, well, it must be okay to do this because, they clean it up. Somebody else cleans it up. I've had people litter and use the rationale, well, there's no garbage can around, so they're going to throw it on the ground. Well, I don't care if there's not a garbage can around. I used to save it or put something in my pocket or hold it until I got to a waste can. I didn't think that just because there was no waste can around, it gave me an excuse to throw it down. So I think that there is a mentality out here that has to be addressed, that sees that the more others clean up after this, the more it's okay for them to go ahead and pitch it onto the ground. And I'm just pretty much over that. I'm over it. And I think they should start cleaning it up. Those who are creating this problem most need to start cleaning it up. And I think if you neighborhoods who were the most trashed, eventually, if they got wind of this, it might not be at once, but if they did, I'm telling you right now, you would probably see some change pretty fast in the reduction of litter. There has to be a strength, and there has to be some sort of consequence, is all I'm saying.
Well, we've seen the negligence in that these repeat balloon release offenders have publicized all their littering events on how many different platforms in all these different ways. And the local municipalities, Cleveland and Toledo, have passed, what language wise is a solid code. It's not strict enough because it's only a minor misdemeanor, but they're not bringing these citations. And then why the double standard? Why the lax the standards. You're right. You're right. But once in a while, there'll be a success story. Like they catch the dipshit illegal dumper
The
off
dump, maybe
who dumped
legal
into
dumper.
the Florida.
Yeah,
The Florida has banned balloon releases. Is that correct?
yeah. Well, you know what? I'm also going to think, why is it, wow, everything takes a ban. It's like, why can't people just get it and just do the right thing? And then they wonder why we have to make all these laws and rules. Well, you know what? If you do the right thing, maybe we wouldn't have to do as much of this. You got to use your freedoms responsibly here. And one of the things that I'm tired of seeing, plant trees, not litter. No more of these roadside teddy bears and balloons and litter and garbage and crosses where somebody gets killed on a highway. I mean, that is not where I want to be remembered. That's a horrible, tragic fatality. I would rather be remembered in the memorial park or the cemetery or bring it there. That's what it's for. And we're seeing an increase of these roadside memorials that is just adding to the litter load. I'm sorry if this sounds callous and insensitive, but is it callous and insensitive to call this out, or is it more callous and insensitive to what this litter and this all this garbage, what nature just recognizes as garbage and litter, what that's doing to the environment? What's
It's the context for the littering is what ancillary to the initial offense, and it is not lost on us that why some of this is happening. And we could do much better. Kind of, I believe that some of these civil rights attorneys like Attorney Crump, who gets involved with a lot of these bereaved families, like we need them to do their non-balloon release type advocacy out there. I think there's a lot of good inroads, but no, you're right. You're right. It's now with all these hurricanes and super tornadoes moving through. It's becoming more important to have things secured. Leaving stuff outside or where garbage can start to blow is just not needed right now.
There was a Kim, and this is where I hope if we can get her take on this from a teaching point of view. She wanted to talk about how schools with simple PSA announcements in the school every day. Again, it's all part of fostering a no litter, no dumping, no trash tolerant society, and an awakening to this again by schools making simple public service announcements in the morning for the students, and in the afternoon when we're done. Don't throw your litter down if you're walking home, folks, from school. Don't throw it
Well,
down when you're coming into the school.
I believe Beechwood and there's a local school that had its own like grassroots playground anti-litter movement. Like the kids are elated to do something to help. But they just also have to be that messenger of prevention too.
I think even here's what's funny, because in the days that litter was supposed to be so much more of in a consumer society, it's going to be always a byproduct, and there's never, you don't stop addressing the issue, and we've really gotten laxed over the years. I think there's more garbage and litter and dumping and whatever along the highway. Say, look up on the embankments, look in the medians, look down the ditches, look at along the concrete walls, look around transitional areas, which is where most littering seems to occur according to Keep America Beautiful. Look around like curves and clover leaves around there. Just watch. Sometimes, I'm not saying don't pay attention to the road, but kind of have your peripheral vision and noticing the bigger picture. Look in these areas and look how much garbage is there. And my whole life, I don't remember ever, even when I was a lot younger, and I was always observant of these sort of things, seeing this much garbage and trash and litter along our highways. And again, that goes back to the state also becoming much, much more growingly and increasingly consumer friendly as far as the big box store and the big convenience store invasion of the ninth and early to mid 90s. I'm just making a tack on a map of where I believe this seemed to escalate a bigger problem with waste. And I'm just kind of pinpointing it as that point in time. But we really need to do it. We've talked about the problem. We've talked about various areas of the problem. And we've talked about potential solutions, what we could do without taking a lot of money, without taking a lot of meetings of the mayor, schools, people as consumers, what they can do. because you know what? The government isn't going to come here and solve this whole problem and do it for us. We have got to collectively be a part of the solution, don't you think?
And it's gonna pile up. Yes, we all add up at all those different levels, but looking at, there was good news that 7-Eleven saw a significant decrease in cigarette sales, over 25% decrease from 2019. People are becoming more careful about their lung health and not buying. So it's going to prevent that cigarette butt litter, which is a third of it. We got to get rid of these disposable vapes. Just sort of cultural messages that are gonna end up helping the litter program too. That's keep on with that.
So trash fish, and I am a big river lover. Okay, I'm a big stream advocate, and one day maybe we can do one of these shows that goes and visits our streams, and let's explore the amazing aquatic life in Greater Cleveland and Northeast Ohio feeder streams and intermittent streams that feed the Cuyahoga or the other main rivers in our area, and ultimately Lake Erie, because everything we throw up here can ultimately wind in the water. I'd like to do that. If we can get just fostering this culture, it's got to start somewhere. I'm just looking at what we can do as people to create a different culture here. Right now, it's laxed, it's lazy, it's dropped the ball, and it's really at no greater time in greater need of addressing of this issue. And this is something, again, it's so preventable. Speaking of tobacco litter, in 2011, sometime around 2011 or 12, it was then one of my Facebook friends, Mike Bennett, he was heading up Keep Ohio Beautiful. And their statistics at one point were like 28 to 32% of overall litter out there accounts from tobacco industry litter. And it's the smallest bits of pieces of plastic and litter that actually hurt the wildlife the most. And that's where I can vouch for that, because I've seen it in the streams, I've seen it in the fish, but I'd really like to get Trash Fish to comment further on that. So with that said, do we have anything else we're going to cover on this today? Or are we going to transition the show into infusing Kim
Well,
and Trash Fish here?
we gotta kind of get cataloged with where Cleveland has been. It puts it all in context. Like, we used to have the litter bugs movement with Jeff, and he's like a white rapper guy, and we all had he got lots of people to come to cleanups. And now it's like Trash Fish is making a voice for the issue, and we're gonna talk to him when the interview gets up. We're gonna talk to him about what went down with a Sherwin-Williams pollution release that he was tracking. We're gonna talk to him about some other things that happened with water balloons that he did a campaign on. Really exciting little things that he's made that are going to be part of what's educating the kiddos for sure, because he's been getting featured on by the sewer district, for instance, when they're at the Clean Water Fest, hosted Trash Fish. And there's just so many caretakers. We have the solutions now. Yeah, absolutely. Do you
If
want
you have
to say what we can look forward to on episode 2?
We do, and I kind of wanted to expand on this. Would be an interesting topic with Trash Fish about. Now, I was always an aquarium keeper. I used to have a custom aquarium installation and maintenance service, but I noticed those who have aquariums, they know there is a certain type of a filter that hangs on your aquarium called a power filter. And I thought it has a cartridge that slips in, the water passes through these filters out all the nasties, and what comes out the other end is clean, clear water. It's like a cartridge, like a square cartridge you put right down in it, and creates like a dam, and the water flows and pushes through it. And I thought, what if we can up the engineering of that to go 1,000 times bigger, to put at the end of that disgusting culvert that empties out onto Edgewater Beach, that sewer pipe that goes there. And every so often they just have to pull this out, clean it out. Think of all the crap that can prevent from washing into that sand and going into that water if we had like a giant, humongous, upscaled aquarium power filter cartridge concept that slips over that outflow of that water. That would be good to discuss with him. I believe that even though the river and the industries were the point source pollutions of the past, I believe litter alone, plastic and all that it contains with the litter, the different components, this could collectively, and I think it has, although less visually dramatic, can create a much bigger problem for our water resources and our environment than the factories or the mills ever actually did. And this is what's pretty disturbing, because you don't see it so dramatic. When they say, well, we cleaned up the river, it caught fire. Well, yeah, that's great, but we're sitting on our laurels, and there are so many other threats to this river right now that are current that we're not doing nearly enough on addressing, and we can't just keep picking it up, cleaning it up. People need to stop throwing it down.
Well, there have been some strident rulings down. The EPA has mandated that PFAS has to be cleaned up at these municipal water systems. They have 3 or 4 years or something to do it. It's part of the Inflation Reduction Act. And Sierra Club has been pointing out that this is going to benefit lots of community solar programs, and they're cleaning up those orphan wells that you've seen some of these instances of what's coming away from these fracking installations, and along with the methane gas. It's not just like it's just it's like actually a really unhealthy gas coming out of these areas. So plugging up those wells, there's the Clean Power Plant rules that have just been reaffirmed by the Supreme Court. So that's really good for the EPA's authority right now as we approach this election season. I'd like to give a shout out to everybody encouraging participation.
We will, and I think that should cover some of the ideas and the topics and subjects here for this initial show. It's going to get better, and I would like to say,
Green Arenas, just putting this together and getting to talk about what's going on in our communities. They just got off a good conference call with the Sierra Club and found out about the plastic bag ban in Athens, Ohio. That's one of the ones to track to see how this authority is working out. But there was good news that Kroger and Walmart wanted to comply with the local ordinance.
And that's funny, because some of the big companies do want to comply and they do want to be a part of the solution. But then the political narrative out there on the other side is, well, they're trying to stop you from making a choice. They're trying to stop you, and they're trying to do this and that. And this is grassroots legislation, folks, from the top, or excuse me, from the ground up, not from the top down. People are tired of seeing these stuck in their trees, clogging up drains all over the highways. So we can really, again, be a part of the solution by not throwing something down. That's such a key component to this. So yeah, this is so preventable. That's what's so frustrating. If we can't even clean up the litter, which I think is just part of the total sum of the issues that ultimately create climate issues. If we can't even do this, we can't even stop throwing something down. I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but I think, we're doomed if we can't even get this under wraps. But here I just wanted to say, okay, this is Rob Carillio and Jeremy Hempy Kusid for Green Arenas. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Greetings, Green Arenas audience. Unfortunately, we were unable to coordinate the interview with Trashfish. However, we would like you to visit his website to learn more about volunteer opportunities and ways to educate the community about reducing the use of plastics. In a statement to our production team, Trashfish said, "Litter isn't the issue. Quit buying stuff made of plastics, or volunteer in one of our kayaks. To support Trashfish, visit www.trashfishclee.org."